My name is Lily Harper, and the story I'm about to share isn't just my story. It's a message that changed everything I believed about life, death, and what comes after. A few years ago, if someone had told me they'd experienced a near-death encounter or glimpsed the afterlife, I would have smiled politely, skeptical, yes, respectful. But in late November 2023, my perspective shifted in ways I could never have imagined. It was a quiet day, unremarkable yet beautiful. I had spent the afternoon with my niece and nephew, Ava and Ethan. Ava, at 10, had this curious wisdom that often left me in awe, while Ethan, 8 years old, was a ball of uncontainable energy. We baked cookies for their school fundraiser, laughing so hard that flour ended up on the walls, and the kitchen looked like a snowstorm had hit. I can still hear their giggles, echoes of pure joy that warm my heart even now. As I drove home that evening, the air was crisp, and the first hints of winter rain kissed my windshield. I felt peaceful, replaying the simple happiness of the day. But peace was short-lived. About 15 minutes from home, an inexplicable weight settled in my chest. Not pain exactly, but a pressure that hinted at something foreboding. I brushed it off as exhaustion or stress, convincing myself I'd feel better soon. I was wrong. The drive home that night felt serene, almost idyllic. The rain lightly tapped on the windshield as my car heater hummed, wrapping me in a cocoon of warmth. I replayed the day's laughter in my mind. Ava's quick wit, Ethan's endless energy, and the joy of simply being present with them. But that serene moment didn't last. About 15 minutes from home, an inexplicable weight settled in my chest. It wasn't pain, but a pressure that made me instinctively tighten my grip on the steering wheel. A wave of unease washed over me, and I thought, maybe I'm just tired. It's been a long day. Before I could rationalize further, the sensation grew sharper. A piercing, searing pain that made me gasp. I struggled to pull the car over, my hands trembling as I fought to maintain control. Panic rose, but there was no time to process it. The pain intensified, and everything around me began to blur. The world dimmed, then disappeared entirely. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my car anymore. The chaos, the pain, the fear, it was all gone. Instead, there was an overwhelming stillness. Not silence exactly, but a profound absence of noise, as if the world had paused. I wasn't afraid. There was no confusion, no heaviness, just an indescribable peace. It felt like stepping out of a storm into a place of light and calm. I looked around, and though I didn't see my body, I somehow knew I wasn't in it anymore. It was a strange realization, yet it brought no fear. In fact, for the first time in my life, I felt free, as though I'd been unshackled from something I hadn't realized was weighing me down. The transition was so seamless that it was only later I understood the gravity of what had happened. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about what I'd left behind or where I was going. I was simply existing in this strange, serene in-between. A new reality was unfolding, and I was just beginning to see it. As I stood in that serene stillness, a warmth began to envelop me, like a gentle embrace. It wasn't the kind of heat that overwhelms. It was comforting, radiant, and filled with a profound sense of love. My surroundings began to take shape, though it wasn't anything I could have imagined. The space was both vast and intimate, stretching endlessly, yet making me feel entirely at home. Colors pulsed with life, hues so rich and vibrant they seemed to breathe. It was a realm of light, but not the harsh, blinding kind. It was soft and inviting, like the glow of countless candles burning with purpose. And then I heard it. A voice, powerful yet tender, resonating not just in the air but deep within me. It called my name, Sophia. Just my name, yet it carried more love, understanding, and significance than I had ever known. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling, a message straight to my soul. It was as though the voice knew every part of me, my joys, my sorrows, my fears, and still spoke with unwavering love. I turned, or perhaps I was simply drawn, and that's when I saw it. A figure stood before me, radiant and majestic. It wasn't the angelic imagery I had seen in paintings or movies. This being was pure light, a presence so strong and yet so gentle it brought me to tears. Its form was luminous, with eyes that seemed to hold galaxies, vast, infinite, and filled with a love that could pierce the hardest heart. "Do not be afraid," the being said, its voice a melody of strength and reassurance. "I have been sent to show you what is to come." The words carried weight, not as a command, but as an invitation. I felt no fear, only a deep sense of purpose and trust. Without another word, the angel extended its hand, not physically, but in a way that called my spirit forward. And then we moved. It wasn't like walking or flying. It was as though I was being carried effortlessly through a tunnel of light. It felt exhilarating, like being swept up in a divine current, each moment filling me with awe. The air itself seemed alive, humming with energy and anticipation. As we traveled, I began to see flashes, glimpses of Earth. At first they seemed distant, like viewing a painting from afar, but they quickly became more vivid. I saw the world, my world, but from a perspective I had never known. I could see its beauty, but I could also feel its burdens, as though the planet itself carried the weight of every sorrow, every struggle, and every unanswered prayer. Then the angels stopped, and the vision before me shifted. I was no longer an observer from afar. I was immersed in a revelation that would forever change the way I saw everything. The journey wasn't just about seeing, it was about understanding. And I could feel the profound lessons beginning to unfold. As the light around us softened, the angel gestured toward a breathtaking scene. Before me appeared the earth, suspended in the vast expanse of space, but this was no ordinary view. It was as though I could see beyond the surface, into the spiritual heart of the world. Colors swirled across the globe, not just blues and greens, but shades that reflected emotion, intent, and energy. Some areas pulsed with warmth and light, while others seemed cloaked in heavy shadows that spread like storm clouds, dark and suffocating. "Look closely," the angel instructed, its voice filled with both urgency and compassion. As I focused, the view shifted. I saw the lives of people across the earth, their struggles and triumphs, their prayers and doubts. It was as though the fabric of humanity's collective spirit had been laid bare before me. In some places, the light was radiant, bursting forth like stars piercing the night sky. These lights were small at first, but grew stronger and brighter, connecting with others to form a network of hope. "What are those lights?" I asked, my voice trembling with curiosity. "They are the prayers of the faithful," the angel replied. Each light represents a soul reaching out to God with sincerity and trust. Together, they push back the darkness. The hope in these lights filled my heart, but then the angel directed my attention to something else. I saw places where the light had dimmed, even in the midst of churches and places of worship. Congregations were gathered, their lips moving in prayer, but their hearts seemed distant. It was as if they were going through the motions, weighed down by distractions and complacency. "Why is this happening?" I whispered, a sadness welling up within me. The angel's gaze was firm yet tender. Many have forgotten the intimacy of true connection with God. Their faith has become ritual without relationship, but not all is lost. Watch. My attention shifted again, and I saw small groups of people meeting in humble settings, living rooms, basements, parks. These were not grand gatherings, but intimate ones, filled with raw sincerity. Their prayers burned like flames, growing brighter with each word spoken in faith. Families, friends, even strangers were uniting in fervent belief, their hearts fully engaged. It was beautiful and humbling to witness. "A great awakening is coming," the angel said, its voice resonating with promise. "But it will not be confined to buildings or led by famous names. It will rise from the hearts of those who seek God with all their being." The vision continued, and I saw a wave of deception sweeping across the world. It began subtly, small compromises, gentle distortions of truth, but it grew, entangling even those who once stood firm in their faith. It was heartbreaking to watch as people were led astray, their convictions eroded by enticing lies. But then I saw something extraordinary. There were those who stood unwavering, their spirits marked with an undeniable light. These were ordinary people, parents, teachers, workers, students, living with a supernatural clarity. They had cultivated a deep intimacy with God, grounding themselves in truth. Their discernment was sharp, enabling them to see through the veils of deception. These individuals became beacons, their unwavering faith piercing the darkness and offering refuge to those searching for light. "Tell them," the angel said, its voice both gentle and commanding. "Tell them to stay vigilant, to seek God with all their hearts. The time is short, and the battle is great, but those who hold fast to the truth will overcome." I stood there, overwhelmed by the beauty and gravity of what I had seen. The light of hope was real and powerful, but it needed to be nurtured, shared, and protected. The vision wasn't just a glimpse of the world. It was a call to action, a plea to awaken hearts and ignite faith. And as the angel's words echoed in my soul, I knew that this message wasn't just for me. It was for all of us. As the angel continued to guide me, the scene transformed again. I found myself observing a world on the brink of profound change. It wasn't a change born of power or politics, but something deeper, an awakening that stirred the very souls of humanity. The angel's voice carried a note of reverence as it spoke. "A great awakening is coming, unlike any before it. This will not be a movement confined to the walls of grand cathedrals or led by the well-known. It will begin in the quiet places, in the hearts of those who truly seek God." The vision unfolded before me, showing small gatherings of people in living rooms, parks, coffee shops, and even workplaces. There were no spotlights, no stages, no fanfare, just raw, unfiltered faith. These individuals were not coming together out of obligation or habit. They were meeting with an urgency and sincerity that was palpable. Their prayers rose like flames, and their discussions were centered on truth, digging deeply into the scriptures to seek understanding and alignment with God's will. I saw young people leading the charge in some of these groups. They were bold, unshaken by the chaos of the world, and determined to live lives of integrity and purpose. They weren't swayed by popular opinion or the fleeting trends of society. Instead, they were grounded in a faith that had been refined through trials. Their worship was not merely songs sung, but lives lived in surrender and service. Instead, next to them were elders, often overlooked by the fast pace of the modern world. Yet, these were pillars of faith, offering wisdom, prayer, and strength to the younger generations. I saw grandparents praying fervently for their families, their homes becoming sanctuaries of peace and power. Their intercession was like a fortress, shielding their loved ones from the storms of deception and despair. "What makes this awakening different?" I asked the angel, overwhelmed by the beauty and intensity of what I was witnessing. "It is born out of desperation," the angel replied. The comforts and distractions that once lulled many to sleep are being stripped away. People are beginning to see the emptiness of a life lived apart from God. This awakening is not about crowds or programs, but about hearts turning fully to their Creator. The vision shifted again, and I saw a wave of opposition rising. The world grew darker in places, with deception and division spreading like wildfire. Comfort and distraction were used as tools by the enemy, dulling the senses of many and leading them away from the truth. Social media, endless entertainment, and a pursuit of self above all else became snares, trapping countless souls in spiritual apathy. Yet, amidst this darkness, there were pockets of light, small but unyielding. These were the awakened souls, standing firm in their faith. They had learned to recognize the subtle lies that sought to infiltrate even the church. Phrases like, "follow your heart," or "your truth," were exposed for the dangerous distortions they were, and these believers clung instead to the unchanging Word of God. They weren't isolated or fearful, but lived with supernatural discernment, balancing grace and truth with remarkable precision. I saw acts of extraordinary courage and love, a teacher who infused every lesson with a quiet but powerful reflection of God's wisdom, a mechanic who prayed silently over every car he worked on, believing that even his small acts could carry divine purpose. A single mother, exhausted but determined to meditate on a shifty lamp, late at night by the light of a single lamp. These were not grand gestures, but acts of daily obedience and faithfulness, each one contributing to the great awakening. The angel's voice carried a note of urgency. Tell them that this awakening is not for a select few, but for all who hunger and thirst for righteousness. It begins with a single decision, a choice to prioritize God above all else. I then saw how this awakening was contagious. Those who carried its light began to touch others, not through grand speeches, but through authentic relationships. They reached out to the broken, the lost, and even the deceived, with love so genuine that it melted barriers of defensiveness. They weren't afraid of difficult conversations or standing against the tide of cultural pressure. Their courage came not from themselves, but from their deep and abiding connection with God. As the vision faded, the angel spoke once more. This awakening will require sacrifice, humility, and unwavering faith. But it will bring life to the weary, hope to the broken, and light to the darkest corners of the world. The time is short. Tell them to prepare. The weight of those words pressed into my heart. This awakening wasn't just a glimpse of what could be. It was an invitation, a call to action for everyone who longed to see God's kingdom come to life in their world. As the vision shifted, I found myself standing before a massive, luminous clock. It wasn't like any clock I had ever seen. Instead of numbers marking the hours, there were images, events, moments in history, and scenes from the present and future. Each one glowed faintly, pulsing as if alive. The hands of the clock were enormous beams of light, moving with deliberate precision. There was no ticking, no sound, just a sense of divine order emanating from the clock. The angel beside me spoke, his voice filled with solemnity. This is the clock of God's plan. It measures time not as humans do, but as heaven does. Each moment, each event, aligns perfectly with the will of the Creator. Nothing happens outside of His knowledge or control. I stepped closer and saw the images more clearly. Wars and conflicts, natural disasters, technological advancements, and societal changes. Each moment was part of a grander narrative. It was both awe-inspiring and humbling to realize that what often seemed chaotic and senseless to us was, in fact, woven into a tapestry of purpose. The angel continued, "Every event is accounted for, every detail planned. What may seem like a delay to humanity is perfectly timed in God's plan. His ways are higher, his thoughts beyond comprehension. My eyes were drawn to a particular image, a scene of people struggling against a rising tide of challenges. Some clung desperately to what they could control, their faces etched with fear and frustration. Others knelt in prayer, their eyes lifted toward heaven, radiating peace despite the chaos around them. The contrast was striking. "Why does it seem that so many struggle to trust in this plan?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The angel's gaze softened. "Because they cannot see the whole picture. Humanity often measures success and failure by what is immediate and visible. They forget that the Creator sees the end from the beginning. Trust requires surrender, and surrender requires faith." The angel gestured toward another part of the clock. There, I saw scenes of great upheaval, waves of deception sweeping across societies, dividing families, and distorting truth. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but as the tide grew, its impact became undeniable. Many were caught unaware, lulled into complacency by the distractions of the world. Yet, interspersed within these scenes were moments of profound light. I saw small groups of believers, their prayers rising like golden beams piercing the darkness. Their faith acted as a bulwark against the tide, holding it back and even reversing its course in places. "These are the intercessors," the angel explained. "They stand in the gap, their prayers moving mountains in the spiritual realm. Their trust in God's timing allows them to act with patience and courage, even when the world around them falters." I then noticed a series of events on the clock that seemed to glow more intensely than the others. "What are those?" I asked. The angel's tone grew reverent. "These are pivotal moments, turning points in history and in individual lives. They are opportunities for humanity to align with God's will, to choose faith over fear, and to participate in the unfolding of His plan." One image in particular caught my attention. It was of a woman, weary but determined, holding a Bible and speaking to her children. Her words carried weight, shaping the next generation with truth and love. Nearby, I saw a man in a business suit making decisions that reflected integrity and compassion rather than greed. Each act, no matter how small it seemed, was part of the clock's intricate design. The angel turned to me and said, "Tell them this. The time is short. The hands of the clock are moving steadily toward the culmination of God's plan. There is no time for apathy or delay. Each choice, each prayer, each act of faith matters more than they know." As I stood there, the clock's brilliance seemed to intensify, filling me with a sense of urgency and hope. This wasn't a vision meant to inspire fear, but to awaken a deeper trust in the one who holds time and eternity in his hands. The clock of God's plan was not just a reminder of His sovereignty, but an invitation to align with His purpose, to live intentionally, and to prepare for what lies ahead. When the vision began to fade, the angel's final words echoed in my heart. "Time is a gift. Use it wisely. Trust the one who controls the clock, for His plan is perfect, and His timing is always right." As the vision began to settle into my heart, the angel's gaze met mine with an intensity that seemed to pierce my very soul. The angel's voice was resolute, yet filled with compassion, carrying a weight that felt both empowering and humbling. "You have seen what must be done," the angel said. "Now, it is time to act." I stood silently, absorbing the enormity of what had been shown. The clock of God's plan, the awakening, the battles between light and darkness. All of it pointed to one truth. This was not a time for passive faith or idle observation. It was a time for action, for urgency, for wholehearted commitment to the call of God. The angel extended a hand, gesturing toward the earth below. The world is crying out for truth, for hope, for love. You are part of God's answer. You and every believer who carries His light within them. I saw images flash before me, ordinary people stepping into extraordinary roles. A young woman leading a Bible study in her living room, her voice trembling with nervousness but filled with conviction. A father kneeling beside his child's bed, praying protection and wisdom over their life. A business owner refusing to compromise integrity, using his platform to shine the light of Christ in a challenging industry. These weren't grand gestures performed on global stages. They were everyday acts of obedience that rippled through the spiritual realm with immense power. Jin Morkon, who created the 7 gates of hell, the angel continued, "Do not underestimate the power of small, faithful steps. Every prayer, every kind word, every act of love is a seed planted in the soil of eternity. You may not always see the harvest, but trust that God does." A warmth began to grow in my chest, a sense of purpose igniting like a flame. The angel's expression softened. You are not alone. The Spirit of God dwells within you, empowering you to do more than you can imagine. Start where you are, with what you have. Share the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Extend love, even when it's inconvenient. Be a beacon of hope in a world desperate for light. I saw more images. Communities coming together in prayer, families reconciling through forgiveness, strangers finding kindness in unexpected places. Each act was like a spark, igniting others until entire cities and nations were glowing with the light of God's presence. Tell them, the angel urged. Tell them to wake up, to seek the Lord with all their hearts. Tell them to stand firm in truth, to reject the lies that seek to divide and destroy. The time is short, but the harvest is plentiful. Workers are needed, those who will not shrink back, but who will step forward in faith and courage. The weight of the message pressed upon me, but so did a deep sense of peace. This was not a burden I was meant to carry alone. It was a call for all who believe to rise together, to be the hands and feet of Christ in a world longing for redemption. Share what you have seen, the angel said. Let it be a reminder that no act of faith is too small, no prayer too simple, no step too insignificant. God's plan is unfolding, and He invites all to be part of it. As the vision faded, I was left with a profound sense of urgency and hope. The call to action wasn't just for me, it was for all of us. To live intentionally, to love boldly, and to trust unwaveringly in the one who holds all things in His hands. This was a moment to choose faith over fear, purpose over complacency, and action over apathy. And so I share this message with you now, not as a directive, but as an invitation. Will you answer the call? Will you step into the role God has prepared for you? The time is now. The light is within you. Let it shine. As I returned to the stillness of my body, the vividness of the vision began to fade, but its weight remained, etched into the very fabric of my being. I opened my eyes in the dim light of the hospital room, surrounded by the hum of machines and the concerned faces of my loved ones. Yet in my heart, there was no fear, no doubt, only a profound peace and an urgent sense of purpose. The message wasn't meant to stay with me. It was clear that everything I saw, every word spoken by the angel, was meant to be shared with you. This isn't just my story, it's yours too. It's an invitation to look beyond the noise of everyday life, to pause and consider what truly matters. The distractions, the fears, the endless race for control and comfort, they pale in comparison to the eternal truth that God is calling each of us into His greater plan. You might wonder, what can I possibly do? I'm just one person. But let me tell you, it doesn't take extraordinary abilities to be part of God's extraordinary work. The angel showed me that the smallest acts of faith, prayers whispered in the quiet, kindness extended without expectation, truth spoken with courage, carry more power than we can imagine. These simple acts create ripples in the spiritual realm, pushing back the darkness and lighting the way for others. Think about the clock I was shown. Every event, every moment, is part of God's divine timeline. The time is short, and the call to action is urgent, but this is not a message of fear. It's one of hope. God's plan is unfolding, and He invites you to be part of it, not in fear of what's to come, but in the joy of knowing that you are never alone. His hand is at work in your life, even now, weaving your story into His greater purpose. The question isn't whether you're equipped. The angel made it clear that God empowers those who step forward in faith. The question is whether you're willing to say yes. Are you ready to live with intentionality, to love boldly, and to seek God with your whole heart? Are you ready to trust Him with your struggles, to surrender your doubts, and to let Him lead you into the fullness of His plan? As you hear these words, know that they are not just for others. They are for you. Whether you feel strong or weak, confident or uncertain, God's love for you is unwavering, and His calling is personal. He sees you, knows you, and has a place for you in His kingdom work. So I leave you with this. The vision wasn't just a glimpse of what's coming. It was a reminder of who we are called to be. We are called to be lights in the darkness, warriors of faith, and messengers of hope. We are called to live lives that reflect the love and truth of Jesus, not just for ourselves, but for those around us. Will you answer the call? Will you let go of the distractions and fears that hold you back? Will you step forward, not in your own strength, but in the strength of the one who calls you? The time is now, and the message is clear. Stay close to Him. Seek Him with all your heart, and trust that He will guide you every step of the way. Kemen Spree Chapamai. This is the message for you. It's not just a story, it's an invitation. Will you accept it?